Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Hong Shah, a senior content analyst from Leader Associates, and I'm really thrilled to have the privilege of hosting this impact interview with Mr. Mark Williamson, the Executive General Manager of Clean Energy Regulator. The Clean Energy Regulator is a government body responsible for accelerating carbon abatement for Australia through the administration of the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme, Renewable Energy Target, and the Emission Reduction Fund. Our discussion today will revolve around the exciting development in hydrogen within Australia and the crucial role played by Clean Energy Regulator in shaping the transformative industry. So, Mr. Williamson, thank you so much for being here today. And we are really thrilled to having you and gain valuable insights into the fascinating world of hydrogen development, not only in Australia, but also the whole Asia-Pacific region.
Thanks, Holman.
So to kick off our conversation, could you please provide us with a really brief overview of your professional journey within the energy sector? Additionally, what aspect of working as the Executive General Manager at Clean Energy Regulator fascinates you most?
Firstly, since 2014, I've led the administration of the Renewable Energy Target, which has been one of our most successful climate policies in Australia. Prior to that, I led the development of and ran our carbon pricing mechanism. And prior to that, I actually had commercial and technical roles in advanced waste technologies, including energy from waste, and also led the regulatory part of the Queensland Environmental Protection Agency, which also had a lot of involvement in the energy sector. In terms of what excites me most, we're an economic regulator, and it's putting in place both the incentives and the obligations and seeing the market actually deliver low emissions.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. So from CER's perspective, what are the key opportunities and benefits that a mature and complete hydrogen industry can bring to Australia's energy landscape and economy? And what aspect should be prioritized to establish a stable and sustainable green hydrogen ecosystem in this country?
Firstly, our Prime Minister and Minister regularly talk about Australia being a clean energy export superpower, and that provides potentially great economic advantages for Australia while assisting the world to decarbonise. Australia has some natural advantages. We have the same land area as the US, 1/13 of the population. We have world-class wind and solar resources, low population density, and we're the biggest miner of iron ore, bauxite and lithium in the world, and we have a lot of the other minerals needed for a clean energy future. So the big opportunity for Australia is actually to produce low emissions hydrogen close to where it's needed to be used to value add to our natural resources. For example, with low emissions iron, Australia is not seeing the opportunity to move all the way to green steel, but we export a lot of iron ore from the west coast of Australia. We export metallurgical coal from the east coast of Australia. There's huge shipping costs and huge shipping emissions, whereas if we in Western Australia, in the Pilbara, if we produce low emissions hydrogen close to where it's needed and value add to low emissions iron, then that's a tremendous opportunity for Australia.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. So as a government body responsible for accelerating the carbon abatement for Australia, so how does Clean Energy Regulator envision the future pathway of hydrogen as a really effective way for decarbonization and a strong economic driver? And what initiative has the Clean Energy Regulator undertaken to promote hydrogen development in the country?
While I mentioned the big opportunity is the value adding, the market will work out what becomes commercial. So buyers and sellers around what are the commercial opportunities. There's discussions about, for example, will it be ammonia or low emissions methanol as the shipping fuel of choice. So we've been working together with our colleagues in the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, and they've been working at the international level with IPHE since 2019 on the necessary accounting frameworks for proving the emissions intensity of production. During the last 3 years, we've been working on trials with industry to look at the practical elements of how a guarantee of origin scheme could work. So really the big foundation we see is the transparency in accordance with international arrangements for the actual emissions intensity of production. And if we think that's transparent, then the market will work everything else out. Commercial arrangements will work out, well, where are the commercial sweet spots? So that's the big area that we're working on with the department. The Australian government has a $2 billion hydrogen head start, and their production-based incentives, which will help to increase the deployment of hydrogen and to scale up and reduce the costs. So that's kind of the territory we're in, is mainly the integrity, because markets work best if there's absolute integrity and transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. So as you mentioned about the our guarantee of origin and the goal scheme. So as we all know, it's actually a target to track and verify emission associated with hydrogen, renewable electricity, and the policy development, which is carried out by the policy development and the Clean Energy Regulator. So what kind of changes will the goal scheme bring to this market, and how is this scheme aligned with the international partnership of hydrogen?
Thank you. I'll start with the second part first. As I mentioned before, our policy department's been working and leading some of the work internationally with IPHE since 2019. So Australia has been a very strong player in that arrangement. We've already released our first hydrogen calculator fairly recently. That is aligned with the work of IPHE, and we see it as absolutely critical as our policy department to keep everything aligned internationally. So that's firstly critical. We are looking at beyond hydrogen to downstream derivatives of ammonia, low emissions methanol, sustainable aviation fuels. So we're designing the scheme with the policy department so it can apply to anything, but effectively we'll be watching where the market goes, where those commercial arrangements are, and we'll need to make sure we can evolve to other products as they become the sweet spot, and to make sure that those accounting arrangements remain consistent with the IPHE. For example, I was asked a question after my keynote by someone around how does the carbon source come into play for low emissions methanol. So these are critical developments that will happen as we go beyond a calculator purely for hydrogen, and as we go to all of those downstream products, low emissions iron, low emissions methanol. It's just critical that we can move as fast as the market does, but keep aligned with IPHE, and that's the exciting challenge. Is we have to make sure that internationally all of these schemes harmonise and can be trusted.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I also agree with you. That's also a really exciting chapter for not only Australia, but also the whole region. But as we all know, optimists are always associated with challenges. So among different challenges such as cost control, local innovations, international hydrogen trade, and so on. So what do you think are the main challenges facing regulating and scaling up Australia's hydrogen industry? And what is CER's particular role in addressing these challenges facing this industry?
The big challenges are supply chain related, because the key foundation for low emissions hydrogen and everything else is renewable energy. And So firstly, we are dependent currently on world supply chains for renewables components, whether that be turbines and panels, transmission lines. So we're dependent on those supply chains, and also contractors. So the advantage of us having low population density, we have lots of wide open space and great renewable resources. But we need to scale up contractors enormously to be able to do the build. So there's a lot of competition in Australia for contractors. There's a lot of infrastructure going on. We need to build out our transmission, the grid, but we also need to scale up renewable energy many times what it has been so far. So that's the really big challenge. We're about 40% renewable energy in Australia in our grids this year that we'll average. The government has a goal of getting to 82%, but it'll be 82% with a lot of fuel switching. We're starting to see a lot more range of electric vehicles, including from China, and so fuel switching will add to that challenge of how we decarbonise our grid. But then beyond that, our safeguard mechanism for the big industrial polluters who it's almost a little over 1/3 of Australia's overall inventory of emissions. That will take an enormous amount of low emissions hydrogen and renewable energy to deal with the 136 million tonnes of Scope 1 direct combustion emissions. On top of that, we have to scale up to be able to value add to all of our minerals to export them, and potentially export in other forms as hydrogen, ammonia, or low emissions methanol. So the question is, how can we scale up many times our current annual additions of renewable energy? And that's going to require a lot of work around contractors and components, and an exciting challenge. I think the big opportunity is that most are saying we'll start to build these industries this decade as we decarbonise, and that's the importance of Australia getting to 82%. But from the wind part of your conference, it's quite clear it's in the 2030s is when the offshore wind is really going to happen. So we've got to move quickly with scaling up our land-based wind and solar this decade and get to the 82%, build the foundations with a lot of pilot scale plants for low emissions hydrogen and everything else. And then I think the great opportunity in the 30s is we scale up with offshore wind, as well as in Western Australia. We'll still have a lot of area for land-based projects and great wind and solar resources. So the supply chains is what it's all about. And we need those components for internationally so we can send our minerals as low emissions minerals and metals.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Mr. Williamson. And your valuable knowledge and expertise in the green hydrogen sector has provided us with a deeper understanding about what's happening in Australia's beautiful hydrogen landscape. So it's been really truly enlightening to explore the exciting development in the hydrogen and the Clean Energy Regulator's essential role in shaping a sustainable future for Australia's full energy landscape. I want to extend my gratitude to Mr. Mark Williamson again for sharing his expertise and visions with us today. And the Clean Energy Regulator's commitment to fostering the clean energy solutions in a sustainable future is commendable. And we look forward to witnessing the continued success of hydrogen development under their guidance. And thank you all for joining us in this meaningful conversation. Let's stay informed, engage in our collective efforts to drive positive changes and build a greener, more sustainable world for generations to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity and for a great conference.